Richard Turner.
Richard Turner.
And looking with both eyes, I couldn't see how he did it.
Richard Turner, he does things that nobody else in the world can do with cars. Nobody.
I don't call myself blind because I see things in ways that other people can't see.
He's in the Hall of Fame at the Magic Castle.
Don't let anyone tell you there's anything you can't do.
Shark, tell us the brutal progression to earn a black belt in your school of sharks.
My sensei, John Murphy, he wanted his testing to earn a black belt to be one of the most difficult in the world. So there was a progression. It started off, the first thing was 1 fight, 3-minute fight. And of course that does not that includes katas and everything else. So green belt was 5 2-minute rounds with a fresh fighter. Brown belt was 10 2-minute rounds with a fresh fighter, and then he really upped the ante with the black belt. 10 fresh fighters, 3 minutes each. It would be like Muhammad Ali fighting Clay, Foreman, Holmes, Frazier, one after the other. You're the same person getting tired. They're fresh.
You get tired from one fight.
Exactly.
The average person.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's why boxers only take on one person at a time.
Right.
And so that was the progression to earn a black belt in this particular system.
This is connected to that, I believe, but can you tell us about all the blood you had to wipe up in Tijuana?
I didn't have to wipe it up. Mrs. Murphy had to wipe it up. Sensei Murphy, when I first started there, John Douglas, Master Douglas, would tell me, sometimes during the night, you'll see Rosemary, she had the thankless job of wiping the blood off the wood floor so nobody was unnecessarily hurt. And what are we doing on that floor? Hurting each other. But we don't want to be unnecessarily hurt, slipping in blood.
Yeah.
And when he first told me that, I thought, that was a joke. It wasn't a joke. Many times I slipped on the floor and ended up right on my butt.
Also connected to this whole martial arts theme, you saw your 9-year-old brother break a board.
Oh, yeah.
And then you started training to do the same thing. And were you nervous during all that?
Yeah, that's
seems kind of. I'd be nervous to want to whack my hand against a thick piece of wood.
Yeah, it was what started me because he was 9 years younger than I am. I'm 16. He's sitting there taking these boards and popping them, and I'd try, and I could not break them. Wow. And I thought, something's wrong with this picture. My little brother is whipping me. It was only 50 years later, they told me he was cheating on that. I didn't know that until literally last year. Yeah, he must have grew up in the same family.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he's doing. I figure he must have had the board turned the wrong sideways so it didn't go against the grain. I didn't go with the grain.
Instead of the apple not falling far from the tree, it's the card doesn't fall far from the deck.
From the deck, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to start training, and he went with a lady next door. Her name was Anita. She was the one that would take him, and I asked if I could train with him, and she said, okay. And her husband was just a big jerk. He was one of these prejudiced, bigoted jerks. He would say, you think Murphy's gonna take you, a blind wimp like you think he wants you to come to school? Plus you have long hair, and Murphy doesn't like people with long hair. But Anita said I could go. So I went with my brother, and of course I was a little afraid to meet Mr. Murphy, but he turned out to be just a kind gentleman, and he said, we don't care if you're blind, deaf, or dumb, we beat everyone equally.
I like that. And speaking of beating everyone equally, can you tell us about the Shark's first karate fight?
Now, if you want to hear something pathetic, this is pathetic.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was, what was that? That was April 9th, 1971. And usually you have your first fight 3 weeks after you start. I was hiding in the back, trying to make myself invisible, hiding behind the other students because I did not want to get in there because the thought of having someone throw a fist or foot at me scared the daylights out of me.
It would scare most people.
Yeah, it would.
Normal people.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I was normal at that time. And then I grew to not be normal. So anyway, so finally, Mr. Douglas says, Mr. Turner, you're on deck. At that time, we were in Douglas's garage. We had two studios, one in Tijuana and one in Douglas' garage. And at that time, he painted the floor red. So it looked like a mat.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was not soft. When I got up, I think that red painted mat had a yellow stain on it. That's how afraid I was.
Wow.
So I get up there, and it was totally pathetic.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't see things coming. Once again, I had that blind hole. Wherever I looked, it was zero, because I have no macula. So I just kind of would look out of the corner of one eye or the other to try to determine what was going on, because I didn't even know what to do when anything was going on. First I was getting beat up by the adults, sort of adults, teens and 20s.
Right.
Then they started having me fight the littler kids. And then they even had me fight a grandma.
Wow.
Yeah, a grandma, over twice my age, and it was just totally humiliating.
Wow.
But
Start somewhere.
Yeah, and I trekked on. You know, it was hard. I was scared, but like you said, I trekked on.
Now, for your green belt, you had to fight 5 men in a row. First of all, that's crazy. Second of all, you're crazy. Third of all, can you describe those fights?
What was that? It was a blistering hot day. It was August 22nd, 1971. And just to describe our dojo, it was a 30 by 50 foot block building. No windows, no air conditioner, not even a fan. One door to go in, and that was it. And inside were around 75 sadistic spectators, and they were waiting anxiously for the bloodbaths to begin.
I bet they were.
Because they heard there were two people testing. John Douglas, was testing for his black belt. He was going to take on 10 3-minute fights, and I was taking on 5 2-minute rounds. And I thought, it was 105 in the place.
Wow.
It was 90, and the humidity levels in the 90s. I thought, we're not going to be able to breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed to say this, because I never would admit to this in the past, but I had asthma. And I was afraid that I was going to have an asthma attack, because sometimes fear alone could trigger an asthma attack. And I get in there, and we started off by having to do our katas and defenses with a billy club. And I was already gasping for air. I was like this, and the fights haven't even started yet. Okay, so it's now time for round one. Murphy says, Mr. Turner, you're on deck. I get up there, and okay. Get up there, I'm scared. And then he only made it worse. Before we started, he says, now if these guys try to tear your head off, don't think about it. Just keep fighting. Are those comforting words?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Oh, yeah. It just terrified. I thought, what? I thought we were going to control the punches to the face.
Right.
So I get in there, bow in, and because I was not a counterpuncher, my only thing I would do is back then I'd start off with a set of combinations that I would front kick, roundhouse kick, and I'd just start throwing techniques and get in on the person. When I got in, I'd have an idea of their body positions and all. So I immediately charged in, and that guy caught me 3 shots right in my blind hole. Bam, 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 right in the face, and it stung. I thought we were going to control the shots to the face.
Yeah, hello.
I know. And then I remember what Murphy said. He said, now if they try to take your head off, don't think about it. Just keep fighting. And I realized I was fighting for my life.
Yeah.
And I was terrified. So I got through round one with a lot of bumps and bruises, and I was literally just gasping for air.
Now, round two, if I recall, you had to deal with some Bruce Lee style kicks.
That's exactly right. Back then, when the Enter the Dragon came out a year or so before, and everybody was doing this combination where they'd do a step-up heel hook, and I'd catch it. I'd go like this, and I'd catch it on my back, and I thought, wow, I blocked it. But that was just the setup. He'd get that one in, then he'd drop down and spin around with the other one, catch me right in the solar plexus.
Ow.
So I'd block one, and I thought, so cool, and then bam, and I kept getting that combination thrown at me over and over and over. I tried to adjust, and I just did the best I could to go after the guy when I was having a hard time just even catching my breath.
Now, in the third round, they didn't want to just give you the same old Bruce Lee kicks. You started getting knees, right?
The third round, I got a case of the measles. This guy,
the
measles,
not
yeah.
the measles, worse, the measles.
Because they were probably sitting there going, hey, that guy, all he does is charge in, start ramming your knee. So every time I would run in, he would take his knee and just ram it in my gut over and over and over. Bam, bam. It's like a giant battering ram, just blowing the breath out of me and stinging and hurting. And anyway, so I managed to survive that. Finally, when Rosemary said tiempo, I thought, oh God, 2 more to go.
Now, speaking of 2 more, did the Sharks survive the 5th round?
That was the tough one. Round number 4.
Yeah.
Let's go for round number 4. This guy was acting like a bull. And I mean, once again, I hardly could hold my hands up. It hurt more to hold my hands up than it did to punch or defend. And everyone kept yelling, keep your hands up, keep your hands up. And so I got my hands up. This guy would stomp, he stomped the floor, he stomped, he switched hands, he grabbed my lead arm, then walked right by me and bam, drove his left fist right in my right eye.
Wow.
And I almost was out. I mean, everything went black.
Yeah.
You know, and a blind guy go black, it's double black. Right. So everything went black, and I thought, I'm going down. And Murphy just grabbed me and says, don't think about it. Wipe off the blood. Keep fighting. Get your hands up. Went back into the ring, and once again, now I'm barely able to hold up I'm barely able to hold up my hands.
Yeah.
And then when Rosemary called time, oh God. And so I had 1 minute to recover, and then came the 5th round, and that I actually sometimes say it was kind of my better round, only because I was so beat up I couldn't feel the pain anymore. And so I just kind of took
They
the
give you
shot.
anesthetic the first 4 rounds.
Yeah, the first 4 rounds were, they were stinging the pain out of my system. So anyway, Rosemary said tiempo in Spanish, time, tiempo, time. The second she said time, I bit the dust. I literally dropped to the floor.
Yeah.
1 second later, I would have not made it.
Yeah.
And of course I have to bow out. Douglas comes up and says, stand up. You have to properly bow out or you are not going to get your belt. And so all I wanted was a drink of water. I was literally gasping for air. I was barely conscious.
Yeah.
I stood up, bowed out. As soon as I bowed out, I fell to the ground again. I stand up and I take the congratulations for about 3 people, and I fell to the ground. I literally crawled to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay, it was just a little hole.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, water.
Fresh water.
Fresh
at
water,
last.
exactly. And Douglas comes in, he goes,
What?
Mr. Turner.
Don't tell me.
Yeah. He said, you better check where you're drinking from. And I'm slowly getting some water, and I'm coming to, and I realized I was drinking from a Tijuana toilet.
Oh, no.
Ghastly. But I got my belt, but it was a nightmare. In fact, on a scale of 1 to 10, thinking it might be a 4, maybe a 5, 6 at the worst, it was a 20.
Wow.
It was beyond what I could imagine how bad it could be. It was one of the worst experiences, one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
Speaking of scales, tell us about the lizard eater.
Oh, the lizard eater, Gene Fisher.
Gene Fisher.
Yeah, he got his name, the lizard eater, because during the East Asian Wars, he worked in the special forces in the jungles, and they survived sometime on lizard meat. Anyway, he also held the world's record for the curl. He could curl, recorded 221 pounds in his weight category, and then unrecorded he did 226 pounds.
And how many curls?
You just tried to get one.
Just one.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
one
One will do.
Yeah. Murphy said, you need to put on some weight. He said, you need some more fighting weight, because at that time I weighed maybe 130 pounds. And I always fought guys bigger, and I was just getting beat up. So my task was to put on some weight. So I was performing with the Lambs Players Theater Company, and right down the road was my little dump apartment. Right up the road was Gene Fisher's gym. And so I went up to him the first time. I asked him, how much does it cost to train here? $9 a month. Can you imagine that? $9 a month.
Wow.
Not an hour, a month.
Yeah.
There's no prices like that anymore. Anyway, so I gave him the $9, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I hope there's a lot of gamblers around here, because $9 was a lot of money for me.
Yeah.
And I'll just tell you a quick story. What I would do when I'd come in there and I would work out, I'd go to the quadricep extension bench, and I'd find some new person I haven't met before. I'd say, hey, we see if we play a hand of poker, some little poker in between our working out, and I'd win like $5 or $10, usually $10.
Yeah.
And because I walked to his gym, or my roommate Chris would drop me off, I'd have to go to rehearsal at the Lambs Players Theater, which was quite a distance.
Right.
And so I had no way of getting there. And this is how I got there. I'd win $10 from them. I say, I'll give you $5 back if you give me a ride to work. And I did that over and over and over. When I was in there for the first year, I'd say, Gene, will you train me? I need to put on some weight. I need to muscle up. I need
The lizard eater.
The lizard
Gene.
eater, Gene
Yeah, how
Fisher.
did you get him to train you?
About a year after I started, he wanted to expand his gym. So he was going to have a foundation poured and double the size. I said, Gene, hire me on. I'll work for you. Just please hire me on. And he goes, well, Richard, what do you call me, Rick, with your weak vision, it's dangerous and you could get hurt, and I'm worried about that. And that just pissed me off. Right. I said, no, please train me. He says, no, it's just construction work is too dangerous. Anyway, I pestered him so long. I said, okay, don't pay me. Just give me enough food to fill me up. That's what I told him. Just give me enough food to fill me up. So he took me on, and he gave me one of the most arduous tasks. You know, when the cement is coming out of the cement mixer into the frame, and it's coming, I had the job of taking that chomper thing and chomping it down. And it took about 7 or 8 hours to lay the foundation.
Wow.
I never let anyone, they kept wanting to have someone give me a break, spell me. I never took a break. I never let anyone spell me. I just chomped away until everything was laid. And afterwards, Gene took all his guys out to a Mexican restaurant. And he tried to pay me. He said, here, take the money. You deserve it. And I said, no. I said, remember our agreement? I said, just give me enough food to fill me up, because I was always hungry. He said, okay. I bought 3 complete Mexican dinners, full Mexican dinners, ate every drop.
Wow.
He says, you can eat like that and you don't get fat? I said, yeah. I said, this is nothing. We just returned from a Lambs Players tour. We stopped at Denver, Casa Bonita in Denver, Colorado, where I had 5 enchiladas, 5 tamales, beans, rice, guacamole, dip, 5 Pepsis, 5 glasses of water, and 16 tacos.
I'm already full from hearing about it.
I know. And he said, you can eat like that and not get fat? I said, yep. He said, well, I'll train you then. So that's how I got him to train me, was he figured if you can eat like that and it doesn't put weight on you, it's going to put muscle on you.
The cement job with no breaks didn't impress him. It was all the food.
The fact that I can eat like a horse.
Yeah, that's funny.
Or like a pig.
3 words.
3 P-I-G.
Madman McCord. Tell us about this man. Who is he? What's the story?
Mad McCord, Jim McCord. When I was in high school, he was our nightmare. He looked like, we called him the missing link, because he literally looked like a gorilla. I mean, it was like this, just all muscle. He could squat 600 pounds. He could bench press more than 400. And he was a Hell's Angel, and he'd ride on these imposing motorcycles called choppers. And I was with my dealing friend named Doug Ferguson and another guy named Billy. And we were at Wells Park, and McCord came riding up on his chopper, and Doug says, don't say anything about needles, here comes McCord. And of course, I was terrified anytime he came up. And he came up to us, and he always carried this 18-inch machete on the side of his hip. And Scuzz carried an underwater spear gun. He pulls off that machete, he goes, are you a needle freak, little Rick? He had this deep growling voice, are you a needle freak, little Rick? Doug, Billy, and he pointed to Billy, he says, I know you are. And I'm going, who, me, what? No. I literally felt like Barney Fife from Andy Griffith's show. I was just a wimpy little cow. Oh, what, me, no. And then he turns to Scuzz and he says, pin him. Scuzz took his spear gun and pinned Billy's foot to the ground.
Wait, his shoe or
his foot,
pierced
right through his
foot?
shoe, right through his shoe,
Whoa.
through his foot into the ground.
Wow.
And of course, Billy's howling in pain.
Yeah.
McCord comes up to me with that 18 machete, sticks it in my throat.
Yeah.
And he goes, "There's another hole for you punk ass freaks." That point on, he became my boogeyman from hell.
Wow.
I mean, I was, every time I'd come make contact with him, I was scared.
Were you relieved then when he was arrested and put in jail?
I think it was 1973.
What was he arrested for?
Well, back then there were some bad cops, I have to say, but back then things were tough and rough. And these two cops pulled him over. They started harassing him. I mean, really harassing him. And he was not going to go with them. And they got into a fight, and McCord having 2-on-1 meant nothing to him. And they were literally hitting him with a teakwood stick, which is as hard as steel, and the butt of their shotgun. They're pounding on him, and McCord's just taking him on, and they had to call for backup. The rest of the cops came. They double cuffed McCord, and they all ended up in the emergency room because here's McCord getting beat up with a butt of a shotgun and a teakwood stick and still fighting back.
Yeah.
Finally subdued him, took him down, and those cuffs were so mangled, behind his back, 2 sets, they were so twisted, they had a hard time getting him off of him.
Wow.
So because of his enormous strength, they strapped him to one of those gurneys with the straps like this, like a seatbelt.
Yeah.
And they had a state judo champion named Dino Morrow, he was his name, to guard him along with some other cops.
Yeah.
And like Hercules Unchained, boom, he busted those straps. He literally reached behind like this, grabbed Gino with no leverage, and threw him over the gurney, and he flew and smashed against a plate glass window.
Wow.
And then the other cops came charging in, and they're pounding on him, and they're hitting him, and one officer hit him and poked one of his eyes out. Even today, McCord has a weird one of those drifting eyes because one was literally poked out of his head.
Wow.
And they sprayed mace on him, and this is what he says: "Don't know what it is, but it burns and it pissed me off." And he attacked him again. Finally, they subdued the guy, took him to the county hospital. He wakes up, he's in a padded cell.
Yeah.
And he's so strong, he literally started ripping the padding off that padded cell. And if you've ever been in a padded cell, it's not like this.
Yeah.
It's like wood.
Yeah.
And he was literally ripped some of that padding off, and he hit those bars, those 2,000 pounds bars, so strong that he warped them, and he caused a couple $1,000s in damage. Now, let's fast forward 5 years. No, yeah, about 5 years. I'm at Fisher's Gym, and I'm working out. And you know, you're always talking to the person next to you, and I'm sitting there saying, yeah, the reason why I work out so hard is you never know when you're gonna run into a guy I knew back in high school, Mad Jim McCord. And he stopped and said, "Did you say Jim McCord?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "I'm Jim McCord." And now I'm a little bit scared because I just sat there and told him I trained so hard because you never know when you're going to run into someone like that.
What a coincidence.
I know. And I told him, you know, I've been training for about 3 years at this point.
Yeah.
And I was pretty strong.
Yeah.
And this is at Fisher's. And I said, "Hi, Jim." I said, "Do you remember Little Rick?" And he goes, "I remember Little Rick, that little runt." I said, "Well, I'm Little Rick." He looked me up and down and says, "You don't look like Little Rick anymore. Looking good, got some muscle on you, looking good." He told me how he was a different person back then. He was crazy. And when he finally woke up after getting all that beating, he said he thought he was in hell. But he said he changed his life, he found God, and he was a carpet layer.
Oh, wow.
Everybody can change.
Yeah.
So I brought him to our karate school. He's fighting Terry Crook, one of the best fighters in the country. And he got Terry and literally threw him against the wall. And Terry said, "I'm never gonna let that guy get a hold of me again." And so Murphy goes lap on deck. Lebanon Augustus Napoleon was his full name. He was from Samoa. A big guy.
Yeah.
And Bill Superfoot Wallace, one of the best fighters in history,
Yeah.
was the ring man when Lap had one of his kickboxing
Yeah.
matches. And Bill Superfoot Wallace said Lap Napoleon had the speed and flexibility of a lightweight. And he was like between 250, 270 pounds, depending on what years you were talking about.
Yeah.
McCord just wanted to go full contact, everything. And so, but basically Napoleon out-techniqued him. McCord would come in, bam, full roundhouse, right upside the hip. McCord just shook it off, kept coming, bam, another one, just shook it off, kept coming, heel hook, kept coming. Finally, McCord decided, okay, I've had enough of this. I'll just say this, I was glad it was Lap fighting him, Lap Napoleon, and not me, because he would have squished me like a little bug.
So at this time, did you have to drink from any more Tijuana toilets around the time you were training for your brown belt?
Well, that's what I had to train, so I didn't have to drink from another Tijuana toilet, hopefully. Gene Fisher, along with all the technique and rounds and all that training at the school, I had to develop my cardio system and my musculoskeletal strength. And so Gene would have me run a circuit. It was 18 stations, and on each station, like you hang here, you do your leg lifts, touch your feet to your leg, your heads. Or on this one, you do push-ups. On this one, you do chin-ups, pull-ups. And there are 3 minutes on each station. The only time you got a break is the time it took you to go from this station to this station to this station. I would just go. I was only supposed to go around it once, So that was 18 times 3 minutes. That's long. And I'd go 2 or 3 times until I literally dropped or vomited. But that was part of the training, so that I did not have happen to me what happened to the green belt, where I ended up drinking out of a Tijuana toilet because I couldn't even breathe. So I have really worked on my wind.
For your brown belt, you asked Murphy to let you train with smaller sharks for the fight.
Yeah.
How did that go over?
Usually I'm fighting Terry Crook, John Douglas, Lap Napoleon, all these big guys. I didn't stand a chance. I said, can I fight guys my own size, like a boxer?
Yeah.
And so Murphy accommodated me, and I actually feel to this day that I did not earn my brown belt. And afterwards I told him, I don't think I deserve this, because even today, I can't remember one memorable moment about it. And he said, you did just fine. You went through all 10 fighters just fine. I did not think I did, so I resolved right there, when it's time for me to take my black belt test, I was not going to ask for favors, because I think he gave me, for all I know, he gave me girls and kids. It was that unmemorable. Well, if it was girls, I would have remembered that, but if it was his daughter Tisha, I would have remembered that, because she would have kicked my butt. She was one of the toughest
Or maybe you wouldn't
fighters.
remember it because you'd be in a
Because
coma.
I'd be down. Because I'd be back in the toilet.
Yeah,
back in the toilet. Yeah, except my head all the way down this time.
Last question. Can you tell us about a brown belt and a grasshopper?
Yes.
A brown belt and a
So
grasshopper.
now I'm a brown belt. And I was with a guy named Randy Thornton. He was a newspaper guy, and he would write stories on different things. He did a story on our organization, the Lambs Players Theater Company, and then he was doing one on this retreat for Navy people in the East Mountains, east of San Diego. So he invited me to go with him. So we go up there, and as soon as we walk in, we see this big semicircle of Navy guys watching this guy, and he was doing a bow kata. And he says, hey, there's a guy doing some martial arts stuff. Why don't you visit with him while I go do my interview? I thought, okay, why not? I thought that sounds cool. And so I was a little shy, and I went up to him and said, hi, I also train in the martial arts. He said, what do you study? And he named off 7 different kung fu styles. Then he asked me, he says, what style do you study? I says, well, Wado Kai and Shotokan. He goes, Japanese styles, too hard, no good, no good. And I said, well, you kind of have to be hard to be effective. He goes, no, Japanese styles, no good. And he did a kata for me, beautiful kata.
Yeah.
Then he told me to do a kata. And so I was going to do Kushenku.
Yeah.
Halfway through, lost my place, making my fool of myself. And then, of course, I'm looking really bad. And then he said, stand back. And he did my kata that I forgot beautifully.
Wow.
And then he goes, well, what else do you do in your worthless school? Now that kind of cued me up a little bit when he said worthless. I said, mainly we fight. We focus on fighting. And he kind of had this little attitude. He goes, oh yeah? He says, well, you say we step in the back and have a little fun. And of course, now I'm a little leery because he's the black belt I'm brown belt qualified, but he was my size.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, when I would shake someone's hand,
Yeah.
first thing I do is I feel their forearm.
Yeah.
I do it with everybody I shake hands.
Yeah.
And that information alone, I know if they're strong, I know their weight, I know their size. There's a lot of things I determine. I always shake hands here. My other hand, you always see it. Shake my hand.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm always doing this, and I'm always telling, look at those guns on that switch.
I got some guns.
Yes.
I switched on.
He switched on. So, and like Colin Powell, Secretary of State Colin Powell, when I first shook his hand, I thought, now this guy's a general. I mean, he'd put Popeye's arms to shame.
Wow.
Wonderful man, and man, did he have some good forearms.
Yeah.
So much that I remember that particular handshake.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I already had him sized up. He was no bigger than I was, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. And I'm used to fighting these big guys. So I thought, okay, so we go out and back. Now we're in this courtyard. It's granite rock cemented in,
Right.
with a granite wall, cemented granite wall around us, okay?
Right.
So we're talking about rock in rock, basically. And we get out there, and I'm still a little leery, because if he's black belt, I was still sizing him up. We get out there, and I start throwing some technique, threw a couple wimpy kicks, and is that all you got? And I landed a couple good punches. We continued on, and then I started hitting him even harder. He's going, wow, you should be a black belt. And I said, not in my school. So I went another round with him. Now I'm hitting him hard. Now I'm kicking him hard.
Yeah.
And then the last kick, he blocked with his knee.
Yeah.
He said, well, at least I blocked that last kick. I said, yeah, but you blocked it with your knee. And he goes again. I said, you should be a black belt. And then I said, what else do you do at your school? I said, we hit each other. We hit each other. I said, hit me. Hit me in the stomach. Hit me again. And then I put my hands behind my back and I turned sideways.
Yeah.
And I said, roundhouse kick me in the stomach. Because at that time, I would do 1,000,000 sit-ups and leg lifts, and I had a pretty defined six-pack.
Yeah.
I had a rock-hard stomach, and that was one of my techniques when I'd fight, is let people hit me and then I'd hit them back. He hit me about 8 more times. He was impressed. I didn't even flinch. Then he did something that impressed me. He said, choke me. And so, I choke you? Yeah, choke me. Choke me as hard as you can. So I literally put my hands around his neck, and I was cheating. I was driving in the softest part of that throat. I was driving my nails. I was driving my fingernails in there. And he just stood there.
Wow.
And to this day, I'm still impressed. But now I had him sized up.
Yeah.
And of course, I was impressed with his little choking thing.
Yeah.
But I had his number. I said, we say we go another round. He says, okay. But again, I say you should be a black belt. And so now we're going and fighting. And like I said, I'm judging things out of the corner of the eye based on the shape of the movement. Tells me what's going on. He was coming at me with a step across side kick. And one of my favorite techniques was I would drop down with my left knee and I'd spin around with my back leg and I kicked his supporting leg up in the air. It was so high, his legs went up and he crashed down on the back of his neck and head. And he didn't move. And I thought, oh dear. And so I went up to him. Are you okay? He didn't say anything. A few moments later he goes, usually I would have jumped that sweep. You saw me do it in my kata. His kata had a part of the thing where they did a sweeping action. I'm worried about him, and then his head dropped back down to the ground, and now I'm scared. Because I'm going, oh, maybe I broke his neck, maybe I broke his back. I didn't know, but I have to tell you, I was a coward. I just got up and left him there. I don't know what happened to him, but even to this day, I have shame that I left him there without getting help or even finding out what happened.
Right.
And that is the rest of the story. I don't know whatever happened after that.
Well.
So that was my grasshopper story because he acted like Caine from the Kung Fu series, Grasshopper.
Well, on that note, that is our episode. That is an intense story to end on.
That was a good one, and I learned a few things.
We're kind of leaving it on a cliffhanger in a way in the intensity for the next episode.
Next episode of Shark Tales.
We'll see you guys there.
We'll see you there. During this test, I hit some of these guys so hard I knocked them silly. But they were fresh, and after a few rounds, I was not. When it was all said and done, I had a bloody nose, ruptured eardrum, a bruise that started at my hairline, ended at my toes. I had my groin kicked into my throat dozens of times, and I fought 3 rounds with a broken arm.